What's going on, folks? Welcome to Kids Today with Dr. Kamal Jones. I am Dr. Kamal Jones. On today's episode, we are breaking down the massive new budget bill that recently passed out of the House of Representatives, officially known as, and I cannot make this up, this is the actual name, as the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. We will discuss this bill's impact on kids, from potential Medicaid cuts to child tax credits and everything in between. As always, please like the episode, subscribe to the channel, and leave us a good rating if you can. We are officially dropping episodes every Tuesday, so stay tuned. In the early morning of Thursday, May 22nd, the House of Representatives passed this budget reconciliation bill known as the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. This is a colossal bill, right? With the recent estimates from the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office putting the price tag at around $3.8 trillion, trillion with a T, that will be added to the federal deficit. With over 1,000 pages and significant policy changes, this is not a minor piece of legislation. This is not just moving the veggies around on the plate. This is a big deal. And so I wanted to take some time today to really delve into this bill and highlight the key updates related to children and families. So there's a lot to unpack, so let's dig in. Now, as we're getting started, I think it's really crucial for us to understand the big picture of why we're here. So in 2017, Donald Trump passed a series of tax cuts which affected the vast majority of the country, but disproportionately provided tax cuts for the most wealthy. And those tax cuts are set to expire at the end of this year. They cost about $4.5 trillion if we're going to actually pay for them and to make them permanent. And so in order to fund that, the Republican Congress has decided to find some offsets, some places to cut the budget. And so the place where they decided to make those cuts has largely been social programs and green energy programs. So to say that in another way, in order to fund tax cuts, which disproportionately favor the wealthy, we have a budget that is going to cut social programs, which disproportionately uplift the poor. And so because of that dynamic, this bill has been identified as the largest single transfer of wealth from the poor to the rich in the history of the United States. Now, keep in mind, children are the poorest demographic in our country, and so they are set to be impacted hard by this bill. Now, that is the lens that I am really viewing this through. That is the framework that I really want us to work through as we discuss it. I've really made a concerted effort to approach this as objectively as possible, really just focusing on what works for kids and what is working against them in this bill. So I wanted to start with the SNAP program, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, formerly known as food stamps, because this is slated to have a really large and direct impact on children throughout the country. So this bill is slated to cut SNAP by $300 billion over the next 10 years. And it's doing it really through two main mechanisms. One is through elongated work requirements, and the other is through shifting the ages of dependency that count. Okay, so let me break down what that means. As it stands right now, if you are in a household where you meet the low to no income requirement for SNAP, and there's a child in that household who is under 18 years old, then that household will qualify for SNAP benefits. What this bill does is it changes that age. It changes the age of a qualifying child from 18 years old down to 7 years old, which means that for all intents and purposes, children who are 7 and over no longer qualify as dependents when it comes to food assistance. The second thing that this bill does is it increases the age for work requirements that are already associated with SNAP from 54 years old to 64 years old, which means that if you do not have qualifying quote unquote dependents and you are now 64 and under, you will be required to work in order to access food for your household through SNAP. So what this means is, all told, about 4 million school-aged children are going to directly lose access to the SNAP program as a result of this One Big Beautiful Bill Act. On top of that, students who are living in households that receive SNAP are directly qualified for free meal programs throughout the country. And so when that household loses access to SNAP, there's a huge barrier that gets put in place for making sure that those children can access free meals that are available in school, free lunch programs, free breakfast programs, things of that nature. On top of all of this, a student's SNAP participation actually is counted towards the school or the district's what's known as a CEP threshold, so the community eligibility provision. What this is essentially when you have a certain number of kids who are using the SNAP program, if you hit a threshold, then the entire school just gets access to free meals, free breakfast, free lunch. And so when you have kids who are removed from the SNAP roll call, you are moving further from that threshold, which means you can reach a point in which millions of children throughout the country can actually lose access to food because their neighbors no longer have access to food. So the data shows us that as many as 18 million students might lose access to food as a ripple effect of the SNAP cuts that are being targeted by this bill. Okay, my friends, I want to touch on the child tax credit. So the bill does increase the maximum amount for the child tax credit from $2,000 to $2,500 per child. It still does not reach those who are making the least. So folks who are under $30,000 still are not eligible to receive any change as a result of this bill. But for those who are on the highest end, they will have some increased access to funds as a result of this child tax credit change. Again, from $2,000 to $2,500 per child. Next, I want to touch on Medicaid. So this bill includes about $700 billion in cuts to the Medicaid program, largely that are being put in place through the adding of very strict work requirements for childless adults without disabilities. These sort of requirements have been tried before in the past in places like Arkansas and have been found to be ineffective. The only thing that they ultimately do is make the process of accessing Medicaid just much more difficult, adding layers of red tape and having, in the Arkansas case, thousands of people who would have otherwise qualified for Medicaid, even with the work requirements, unable to access it because the process is so confusing, right? You had to make phone calls or send in paper forms or do online forms every single month in order to prove that you were eligible. So a confusing process like this is only going to lead to the loss of, in the case of nationwide, millions of people having access to the program. Overall, we're talking about 10 to 14 million uninsured Americans throughout the country as a result of these policy changes. Now, why does this matter for kids? All of us rely on an ecosystem of health insurance programs throughout our state, throughout our city, throughout our country. So when folks who have Medicaid or who have health insurance are paying for healthcare in a particular hospital or facility, that helps to keep the doors open and helps to keep access to health for all of us. And so seeing 10 to 14 million people potentially losing access to healthcare in this country means that hospitals and clinics throughout the nation are going to be facing decreased access to funding, and many will have to close their doors, which means that access to healthcare for children is going to be impacted as a result. It's also important to highlight that one of the big Medicaid recipients who is on the chopping block as a result of this bill is Planned Parenthood, where millions of people go to get their health care every year. Young people, adolescents, rely on access to Planned Parenthood for their health care. Planned Parenthood will be directly impacted if this bill becomes law in its current form, as has just passed out of the House. I want to now touch on something called Trump accounts. You might be hearing about these Trump accounts, so something to keep an ear out for. Trump accounts are essentially tax benefited savings accounts for children. What this bill is going to do is it's going to pilot a program which will automatically open accounts and seed $1,000 for every baby born from 2025 till 2028. Families can then make pre-tax contributions into those accounts moving forward. And so the kids will be able to access those funds once they get over 18 years old. What financial experts are saying is that, of course, the free seed money is a overall positive thing, right? It's money in the pocket, though they won't be able to access it for 18 plus years. The rest of the functioning of the account is not particularly valuable. The benefits are relatively paltry compared to other tax shielded savings accounts that Americans are already eligible for their kids. So things like 529 accounts that parents have been using for years and years to save for college. All right, next, let's just touch on the childcare side of things. So one thing this bill does is it has a provision for what's called a 45F credit for employer-provided childcare. What this is going to do is expand that existing credit beginning in 2026. What it means, essentially, the punchline, is that businesses will be able to get a higher level of credit, of tax credit, for providing for childcare within their facilities or associated with their facilities. And so it increases the maximum credit for businesses from $150,000 to $500,000 or $600,000 for small businesses. And it also lets businesses receive credit for contracting with third-party providers for childcare services. There's a few other provisions in this. The main takeaway is that the hope will be allowing for businesses to be more incentivized to provide childcare options for employees, which is a good thing. We want to see the government providing increased access to childcare. I was happy to see this. This provision is going to cost about $731 million beginning in 2025 through 2034. I want to wrap up talking about green energy. So this tax bill would effectively eliminate two major tax credits that have been absolutely instrumental in the surge of clean energy sources throughout our country. Is going to be working directly against the Inflation Reduction Act and the huge steps that we had taken to promote clean energy. Estimates are that the deployment of clean energy to our electricity grid could decline by 57 to 72% over the next decade. You know, we have talked on a number of occasions how children, our young people, are going to be the ones most directly impacted by the climate crisis as it approaches us. So this is us moving in the opposite direction of how we need to be moving for children in our country to promote clean energy. All right, my friends, we will leave it there for today. As I mentioned at the top, this bill is over 1,000 pages long with countless provisions woven throughout. But these are some of the key ones that will impact children and families throughout our country. What is most important at this moment is what happens next. While this bill has passed out of the House of Representatives, it still faces a major hurdle as the Senate begins the process of reviewing it and making their own modifications. This is really our opportunity for action. Please make no mistake about it. Some version of this bill is going to pass. Some version of this bill is going to become law. And so the question is, are we going to have a say in what the final outcome is? Or are we going to be quiet and let them do whatever they want, no matter the impact it's going to have on children and families? Now, in a previous episode, I detailed how to contact your U.S. Senator, and it is time to do that again. Time is of the essence when it comes to this bill, as Republicans aim to get it to the president's desk by early July, which is only 5 or 6 weeks away. Our calls matter. I'm going to place in the body of our description box and in the show notes how to contact your representative. I will also recommend that you consider following your senators and your representatives on social media or on their email listservs, so you can also see when town halls may be taking place, because town halls are an important venue to make your voices heard. I will include some resources for engaging in town halls in the show notes and description box as well. Okay, my friends, that is our show today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thanks for sticking with me. I know that there was a lot of information here, but I wanted you to have one single source of truth that you can kind of dive into or tap into whenever you wanted, so you can get a reminder on the most important key issues that are impacting children as a result of this One Big Beautiful Bill Act. Please definitely make sure to like the episode, subscribe to the channel, rate us on Spotify, stay engaged. Your engagement really makes a huge difference as we are pulling through the thousands of pages, reading dozens and dozens of articles, making sure that you are having access to the most up-to-date, most accurate information that is impacting children. And so please stay engaged. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will catch you next time on Kids Today.